A 9-year-old girl this week in Houston. Today we are learning the suspect was out on bond at the time of the shooting.
Jeremiah Jones has a long rap sheet of charges between Harris and Fort Bend counties. Anayeli Ruiz joins us live outside the jail with the latest now. Anayeli.
Well, that's right. 22-year-old Jeremiah Jones was actually out on bond just a few weeks ago, and police say it was during that time when he killed 9-year-old Kylie Sorrells.
At approximately 9:50 p.m. on June 13th, 2022, Houston police responded to a report of a domestic disturbance at an apartment complex in the Heights neighborhood, located on Oxford Street. Upon arrival, officers discovered a 9-year-old child and a 29-year-old woman with gunshot injuries inside one of the units. The child, later identified as Kylie Sorrells, was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital, while the adult, Brittany Sorrells, sustained injuries and was transported for treatment. Preliminary investigation revealed that 22-year-old Jeremiah Jones, a former inmate partner of Brittany Sorrells, had entered the apartment during a confrontation over personal and property disputes. The suspect fled the scene before law enforcement arrived. Within 24 hours, police located and arrested Jones. Authorities continue to investigate the exact circumstances, including the sequence of events inside the apartment, the actions of all parties present, and how a domestic dispute escalated to a fatal outcome involving a minor.
22-year-old Jeremiah Jones is now facing capital murder charges. He's being charged for allegedly shooting and killing 9-year-old Kylie Sorrells on Monday night. And new court documents state the victim's mother, Brittany Sorrell, had dated Jones for 8 months, and she told investigators they had broken up 2 months ago. Detectives say Jones came to her apartment last week with a gun and threatened to kill her. And victims advocate Andy Kahn with Crime Stoppers says he feels Jones should not have been out on a bond in the first place.
They had this guy multiple times. They had umpteenth amount of opportunities to keep him in custody because every time he was released on bond, he violated his bond conditions by being charged with yet another crime.
According to court documents, Jeremiah Jones was out on bond in Harris County for the following alleged offenses. Some of these are felonies: evading arrest in a motor vehicle, terroristic threat against a family member, felon in possession of a weapon, burglary of a habitation. But these are not the only crimes he's accused of committing. Take a look at all his prior mugshots. Jones has an extensive criminal record dating back to 2018, including theft, burglary, and trespassing.
While everyone is entitled to a bond, if you are on bond for a felony offense and you pick up a new felony offense, you are no longer entitled to a bond. And at that time, the judge can revoke your bond and zero or no bond you so that you cannot be released from custody.
Something that didn't appear to happen in Jones' case.
In this particular case, it appears that he had several opportunities where the state could have filed to no bond him and the judge could have held him in custody without a bond. And that didn't happen in this case.
Well, Jones' first court appearance is set for next week. Reporting live, Anayeli Ruiz, KHOU 11 News.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. The victims at the center of this case were a young child and her mother. The child, Kylie Sorrells, was 9 years old at the time of her death. She lived with her mother, Brittany Sorrells, and 2 younger siblings, ages 1 and 7. Kylie was an active and bright child with interests that reflected her age and curiosity. She enjoyed playing basketball and participated in youth programs designed to foster community engagement and skill development. She also made social media videos, which demonstrated her connection to modern forms of expression and her engagement with friends and peers. Within her family, she was known as a cherished daughter and sister, and her presence was central to the daily lives of those around her. Brittany Sorrells, approximately 29 years old at the time, was a single mother managing her household and raising her children. She had been in a relationship with Jeremiah Jones, the suspect in this case, for several months. That relationship ended 2 months prior to the incident. Despite the separation, Jones had maintained contact with Brittany, and authorities later noted a history of threatening behavior directed toward her. On the night of the incident, Brittany was present in her apartment with Kylie and her other children, unaware that the events about to unfold would result in irreversible consequences. Brittany survived the attack and would later provide detailed statements to law enforcement that were instrumental in reconstructing the sequence of events and identifying the suspect. The suspect, Jeremiah Jones, was a 22-year-old male with a known criminal history. Prior to this incident, he had been charged with evading arrest and other violent offenses, and at the time of the shooting, he was out on bond for a prior felony. His background suggested a pattern of confrontational and potentially violent behavior. Law enforcement records indicated that Jones had previously threatened Brittany with a firearm. No protective order or restraining order was in place to prevent him from contacting her, a fact that would later highlight critical gaps in preventive measures for domestic disputes. On the night of June 13th, Jones arrived at the apartment without permission. He entered the residence, which he had no legal right to enter, during what appeared to be a confrontation centered on property and personal grievances. Investigators later determined that he was upset about property inside the apartment and made demands regarding personal possessions. Once inside, he engaged directly with Brittany Sorrells, confronting her about these issues. During this confrontation, Jones drew a firearm and fired multiple shots. The first shot struck Kylie Sorrells in the head. She was immediately incapacitated, and the severity of her injury rendered her unable to respond or escape. A second shot struck Brittany Sorrells, who sustained non-fatal injuries but required immediate medical attention. The attack was sudden and decisive, leaving little opportunity for anyone inside the apartment to react. At the time of the shooting, Kylie and her mother were inside the bedroom with the 2 younger children, who were also present in the apartment. The siblings, ages 1 and 7, were unharmed physically during the incident, but were witnesses to the events as they occurred. Following the shooting, they were placed in the care of family members to ensure their safety and to remove them from the traumatic environment. The presence of the children added an additional layer of gravity to the incident, highlighting the indiscriminate nature of the attack and the risk posed to all individuals in the household. Investigators reconstructed the sequence of events using statements from Brittany, forensic evidence from the crime scene, and interviews with neighbors who may have heard or observed the confrontation. The evidence indicated that the suspect's actions were deliberate and targeted, particularly in the case of the child, who was fatally struck despite not being the intended focus of the dispute. The shooting inside the bedroom was confined to a very short time frame, but the impact was immediate and irreversible. The crime also exposed procedural gaps and preventive measures related to domestic disputes. The suspect's prior history of threatening behavior and his current status on bond for a felony did not prevent him from accessing the residence. There were no protective orders in place, and law enforcement had limited capacity to intervene preemptively despite the known risks. These factors became points of scrutiny in the aftermath of the shooting, as authorities and community members questioned the mechanisms available to protect victims in similar circumstances. Following the incident, law enforcement conducted a rapid response to locate and apprehend Jeremiah Jones. Within 24 hours, Jones was located and arrested without incident. Tactical units and standard police procedures were used to ensure that the suspect was taken into custody safely and that further risk to the community was minimized. Once arrested, Jones was charged with capital murder for the death of Kylie Sorrells and aggravated assault for the injuries inflicted on Brittany Sorrells. Bail was denied due to the severity of the charges, and the case was placed under the jurisdiction of the Harris County legal system for prosecution. The impact of the shooting extended beyond the immediate victims. The surviving family members, particularly the siblings, required immediate protection and ongoing care. The community reacted with concern, and the case drew attention to broader issues of domestic violence, juvenile safety, and the enforcement of protective measures. Local authorities and advocacy groups highlighted the importance of addressing known threats proactively to prevent similar tragedies. The combination of criminal history, lack of restraining measures, and rapid escalation of violence contributed to the catastrophic outcome in this case. In summary, The events of June 13, 2022, involved a calculated intrusion by a suspect with a documented history of violence into a family residence. The attack resulted in the death of a 9-year-old child, injuries to the mother, and lasting trauma to the surviving siblings. Kylie Sorrells was a child with active interests and strong family connections, whose life was ended abruptly. Brittany Sorrells survived the attack and provided critical testimony for the investigation. Jeremiah Jones was apprehended and charged with capital murder and aggravated assault. The incident underscores the risks associated with domestic disputes, particularly when involving individuals with prior criminal records, and raises questions about the effectiveness of preventive legal measures in protecting at-risk families. The sequence of events, the background of the individuals involved, and immediate investigative actions provide a comprehensive understanding of this case. The deliberate actions of the suspect, combined with systemic gaps in domestic violence prevention, contributed to an outcome that could have been mitigated under different circumstances. The narrative highlights the need for awareness, legal protection, and rapid law enforcement response to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. The case remains under legal review, and its implications extend to policy discussions and community safety initiatives. Within minutes of responding to the 911 call, reporting a domestic disturbance and gunfire at the apartment complex in the Heights area of Houston, police officers arrive at the scene to find a child, 9-year-old Kylie Sorrells, fatally wounded from a gunshot to the head. Her mother, Brittany Sorrells, was also injured but survived and was immediately transported to a nearby hospital for treatment. Law enforcement quickly determined that the perpetrator was still at large, and attention immediately shifted to identifying and locating the suspect responsible for the violent attack. Investigators reviewed initial statements from Brittany Sorrells and other witnesses present at the scene, confirming that the suspect had entered the residence during a dispute with Brittany. The suspect, identified as 22-year-old Jeremiah Jones, had a known history of violent behavior and prior interactions with law enforcement. Police were aware that Jones had been involved in prior criminal offenses, including felony evading arrest, and had been released on bond, creating immediate concern for his potential flight risk and the threat he posed to the public. Houston Police Department units launched an organized manhunt targeting areas where Jones was known to frequent. Tactical teams focused on known associates, family connections, and locations where he might attempt to hide. Officers coordinated with multiple patrol divisions to cover the city and establish checkpoints in strategic locations. Investigators also reviewed video surveillance from nearby streets, apartment entrances, and commercial areas surrounding the Heights neighborhood. Witness statements were cross-referenced with known habits of the suspect to narrow the search area, and law enforcement made use of digital communication traces, including potential phone activity and social media monitoring, to anticipate his movements. Within 24 hours of the shooting, tactical units located Jeremiah Jones in a public area. Law enforcement officers carefully coordinated the apprehension to minimize any risk to officers or civilians. The arrest was executed without incident, with the suspect taken into custody safely. He was transported to Houston Police Headquarters for processing and interrogation. Following the arrest, Jones was booked on charges, including capital murder in connection with the death of Kylie Sorrells and aggravated assault for injuries sustained by Brittany Sorrells. The swift capture of the suspect was seen as a critical step in maintaining public safety and preventing further potential violence. The police emphasized that the rapid arrest was a result of coordinated efforts between patrol officers, tactical units, and investigative personnel who acted on intelligence gathered immediately after the shooting. Investigators conducted a thorough review of the crime scene to collect evidence critical to the prosecution of the case. Forensics teams documented and preserved ballistics evidence, including bullets and cartridge casings, and conducted trajectory analysis to establish the sequence of shots fired. Evidence of property disturbance, including damaged items in the apartment, was cataloged as part of the investigation to demonstrate the suspect's actions upon entering the residence. Witness statements played a significant role in establishing the timeline of events. Brittany Sorrells provided an account of the suspect's actions during the confrontation, while other family members, including siblings who were present in the apartment, gave additional perspectives. Neighbors in adjacent apartments also offered observations of unusual activity and the suspect's presence in the vicinity of the complex before and after the shooting. Medical reports from both victims were reviewed to confirm injuries, the severity, and the impact of the shooting. The autopsy of Kylie Sorrells confirmed that her death resulted from a gunshot wound to the head, and her injuries were consistent with the accounts provided by witnesses. Brittany Sorrells' injuries were documented to support aggravated assault charges and corroborate the sequence of events inside the apartment. Following the arrest, Jeremiah Jones was formally charged with capital murder for the death of a 9-year-old child and aggravated assault for the injuries sustained by Brittany Sorrells. The capital murder charge reflected the severity of the act and the fact that the victim was a minor, making the crime eligible for maximum penalties under Texas law. Bail was denied due to the seriousness of the charges and the risk the suspect posed to the community, as well as the potential for the death penalty given the circumstances of the homicide. The legal process moved forward with initial court appearances, during which the charges were formally read, and the denial of bond was confirmed. Pre-trial motions were filed by defense attorneys, likely addressing evidence admissibility, potential claims regarding procedural errors, and other standard legal procedures. Prosecutors indicated their intent to pursue a rigorous case, supported by forensic evidence, eyewitness accounts, and medical documentation. The trial timeline was established, with further hearings scheduled to review pre-trial motions, establish jury selection procedures, and prepare for potential expert testimony regarding ballistics and crime scene analysis. The legal proceedings highlighted the complex nature of prosecuting cases involving domestic violence and minors, requiring careful documentation and coordination of multiple investigative and forensic teams. The capital murder charge carried the possibility of the death penalty, making the trial a high-profile case within the Houston criminal justice system. The case of Kylie Sorrells sparked significant discussion about system failures in criminal justice and domestic violence prevention. Critics highlighted the fact that the suspect had previously been charged with violent offenses and released on bond prior to committing the homicide. This raised questions regarding the adequacy of pretrial supervision and the mechanisms in place to prevent individuals with violent histories from posing an ongoing threat to families and communities. Public concern extended to the lack of protective measures available to domestic violence victims. While Brittany Sorrells had experienced threatening behavior from the suspect, no formal protective order had been in place, leaving the family vulnerable. Discussions emerged regarding how law enforcement and the courts could strengthen protocols for domestic violence cases, including enhanced monitoring and swift intervention when threats are made. Community response reflected shock and disbelief at the brutality of the crime. Neighbors expressed concern over safety in the Heights area and the wider Houston community, emphasizing the need for vigilance and awareness regarding domestic violence. Police officials reiterated the violent nature of the incident, outlining the steps taken to apprehend the suspect and prevent further harm. Statements from law enforcement underscored the importance of timely reporting of threats, collaboration with investigative teams, and the rapid mobilization of tactical units in emergency situations. The public discourse following the case also addressed the broader implications for juvenile safety. The death of a 9-year-old in her own home highlighted vulnerabilities faced by children in households impacted by domestic disputes. Community leaders, advocacy groups, and local officials used the incident to call for reforms in domestic violence protections, pretrial supervision policies, and the overall responsiveness of criminal justice systems to threats posed by known offenders. The shooting of Kylie Sorrells resulted in immediate and long-term consequences for the victim's family, the local community, and the criminal justice system. In the days following the incident, law enforcement, social services, and community organizations coordinated to support the surviving family members. The immediate concern was the care and safety of Kylie's 2 younger siblings, aged 1 and 7, who were present in the apartment at the time of the shooting. These children were temporarily placed under the supervision of extended family members while authorities conducted an assessment of the home environment and ensured the safety of all minors involved. Social services continued monitoring to provide trauma-informed care and ensure that the siblings were supported both physically and psychologically. Funeral arrangements for Kylie Sorrells were scheduled within a week of the incident. Local funeral homes coordinated with the family to conduct services that included a viewing, memorial, and burial. The community's involvement was substantial, with numerous local residents, organizations, and schools providing financial assistance, donations, and logistical support for the funeral proceedings. Fundraising efforts were organized to cover funeral expenses and related costs, reflecting a community response to the sudden loss. These efforts also included online fundraising campaigns to ensure that the family could manage the financial burdens resulting from the shooting, which included medical bills for the mother's injuries and ongoing care for the surviving children. The surviving siblings required ongoing care and monitoring due to the trauma they experienced. Authorities recommended counseling and specialized support services to address the psychological impact of witnessing the shooting. The placement with extended family provided immediate stability, but social services emphasized the need for a structured, long-term plan to mitigate potential developmental and behavioral challenges resulting from exposure to such a violent event. The shooting raised significant questions regarding domestic violence, juvenile protection, and the effectiveness of criminal justice interventions. The suspect's prior history, including felony charges and previous violent behavior, prompted public and institutional scrutiny regarding bail policies and the supervision of individuals with known violent tendencies. The case highlighted potential gaps in enforcement of protective measures for domestic violence victims, particularly in situations involving former intimate partners with access to firearms. Local authorities conducted internal reviews of their protocols for responding to domestic disturbances. The review examined the timeline of previous calls related to the suspect and assessed whether intervention strategies were sufficient to prevent escalation. Key considerations included response times to prior reports, effectiveness of warnings and restraining orders, and the coordination between law enforcement and social services. The objective was to identify any procedural deficiencies that may have contributed to the occurrence of the shooting, as well as to recommend adjustments in policy for domestic violence cases involving juveniles. Additionally, discussions emerged at municipal and state levels regarding juvenile protection and the role of law enforcement in preventing access to firearms by individuals with prior violent offenses. Public safety officials and advocacy groups recommended enhanced screening measures, mandatory reporting of domestic threats, and structured oversight for high-risk individuals. The case became a reference point for broader conversations about domestic violence prevention, emphasizing the need to safeguard both adults and children within at-risk households. Despite the arrest and charging of the suspect, several unresolved questions remain, primarily centered on forensic details, court evidence, and broader systemic implications. Investigators have collected ballistic evidence and conducted a thorough examination of the apartment to establish the sequence of events leading to the shooting. Detailed information regarding the trajectory of bullets, point of entry, and the suspect's actions within the apartment will form a critical component of the prosecution's case. This evidence is expected to clarify the timing and intent behind the gunfire, as well as the positioning of all individuals present during the incident. The defense strategy remains pending, including potential motions and plea negotiations. Legal counsel for the suspect may explore avenues such as challenging the admissibility of certain evidence, questioning procedural adherence in the arrest and investigation, or asserting mitigating circumstances. These proceedings will directly impact the structure and timeline of the trial. Observers note that the case will test the legal system's capacity to balance due process with the severity of the charges, particularly capital murder for a juvenile victim. Forensic analysis continues to be a central aspect of the investigation. Weapon history, including the ownership, prior use, and ballistics profile of the firearm involved, is being examined to determine whether any prior interventions could have prevented access to the weapon. Autopsy findings for Kylie Sorrells are being reviewed in detail to establish cause of death, trajectory, and the nature of the injury sustained. These findings are essential for establishing both the facts of crime and the degree of premeditation involved. Broader systemic implications remain a focus for public officials and policymakers. The case underscores a need for comprehensive domestic violence prevention systems, including rapid intervention mechanisms, monitoring of high-risk individuals, and enhanced protective measures for children in potentially dangerous household environments. Lessons for law enforcement include improving risk assessment procedures, ensuring communication between agencies handling domestic disputes, and creating frameworks for proactive engagement before incidents escalate to lethal outcomes. The community impact of the shooting continues to influence public discourse on juvenile safety, domestic violence, and criminal justice reform. By examining both procedural shortcomings and successful interventions, authorities aim to extract lessons that can be applied in future cases. These analyses include the evaluation of emergency response protocols, social services engagement, and the legal processes surrounding individuals with histories of violent behavior. While the immediate case involves the prosecution of a single suspect, the broader implications extend to policy adjustments, procedural improvements, and long-term strategies to reduce the risk of similar tragedies in domestic environments. The Kylie Sorrells case remains a reference point for evaluating how systemic and procedural factors intersect with violent incidents. The combination of forensic analysis, legal proceedings, and policy review creates a comprehensive framework for understanding not only the circumstances of the specific shooting, but also the measures necessary to prevent future occurrences. Ongoing monitoring, trial proceedings, and community engagement will determine the extent to which lessons are implemented and whether structural improvements are sufficient to protect vulnerable populations in domestic settings. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.